There's a person, his name was Rabbeinu Apeshitz. He lived in the 1700s. The whole story of the Shapsai Tzvi, he was the false Messiah, Yimach Shmo. He lived in the latter part of the 17th century, and he claimed he was the Messiah, and he lived in Poland, and he was definitely out of the ordinary brilliant. He had a charisma, one of a kind, and he falsified many things on a Kabbalistic level, and he claimed he was Messiah. And the Jews in Poland at that time, which were very essential to the Polish king, commerce-wise, many-wise, believing that this man was the Messiah, they said they're picking themselves up, leaving Poland, going to Palestine. As a result of this, the king of Poland felt that the Jews they're fomenting a revolution, and they started to kill. There were pogroms, many Jews were killed. There was a person, his name was the Chacham Tzvi, his name was Tzvi Ashkenazi. He was an Ashkenazic rabbi, but he was a rabbi among the Sephardic Jews. Therefore, he was called Chacham Tzvi. He was the father of Rav Yaakov Emden. It's important to know Yaakov Emden. There's a siddur that's called the Rav Yaakov Emden siddur. It has his commentary on it. And his father fought this Shapsai Tzvi because it was very difficult to identify him and to show clearly that he was a false Messiah. But the Chacham Tzvi proved it. He was banned from all the Jewish communities. He went to Turkey. He converted to Islam, and he died in a prison in Turkey, in Istanbul. That was the end of the story of him. But as a result of that, there were cells of his followers which were not flushed out. And they created much havoc and terrible things in the community. Rabbi Yonasan Apeshitz himself was a great Kabbalist. And Rav Yaakov Emden, being brought up in the home of his father, Chacham Tzvi, anybody who was involved in Kabbalah to any degree, in his eyes was suspect. He's one of the cells of the false Messiah. And he had suspected Rabbi Yonasan Apeshitz, who was a great tzaddik. He was a leading Torah sage of the generation, that he was part of this group. And there's a major battle in Europe. Many communities sided with one or the other, until finally the Nodi Yehuda, Rabbi Cheskel Landau, was the chief rabbi of Prague. It really was never settled, but he actually put a ban that you're not permitted to write amulets. From going forward, because amulets are based on Kabbalistic conjugation of psukim, letters, whatever it is, it cannot be done. But that's the story. This was Rabbi Yonasan Apeshitz. We have many svarim from Rabbi Yonasan Apeshitz. We have in the glosses of the Shulchan Aruch, he has a commentary. He has a work called Urim V'Tumim, which on Choshen Mishpat, different things he has. And Rabbi Yonasan Apeshitz was a genius, had a mind like a computer. He spoke over 35 languages. He had a grasp on everything, whether it was mathematics, history, science, besides Torah, everything. And he made a comment. He said, when Shlomo HaMelech says in Koheles, hevel havalim, it's the vanity of vanities. Everything is vain. Everything existence has no value unto itself unless it's somehow to facilitate spirituality. Otherwise, everything is vain. Nothing has any value. So the question is, Rabbi gets up, tells his congregation, all the material you have is nothing. All your interests and culture is all nothing. So the people say, what does the rabbi know? The rabbi has no background, no understanding what culture is. He doesn't know what wealth is. He doesn't know what material is. I mean, how could he be telling us something which is not, he has no understanding what it is? So King Solomon, Shlomo HaMelech, ruled the world supreme. He had wealth. Nobody was equal to his wealth as a king. All the nations of the world came to him and they brought him gifts and he had honor. And he says, it's all meaningless. Hevel Shlomo HaMelech was the wisest man who ever lived. So both in spiritual and physical, nobody was his equal. And he is telling you, everything is vain, everything is nothing, unless it's to facilitate spirituality. But anybody else other than him, if you would say that, right away they'd have the detractor say, sure, he's saying it, what does he understand? Rabbi Yonason Eibshitz, being the genius that he was, as I said, nobody was his equal in intellectualism, even secular areas. Nobody was. In Torah, nobody was. And he says, when I tell you it's nothing, it's nothing. Because I have an understanding, because I interact with all segments of the community, whether they're Jewish, non-Jewish, every echelon of society, and I'm telling you, all of it's vain. That's what he said about himself. Moshe Rabbeinu himself, the Gemara tells us in the Dorim, that although Moshe Rabbeinu did not participate in the borrowing of the personal effects of the Egyptians in Egypt, the gold, the silver vessels, all the Jews who left Egypt were very wealthy. Was Moshe Rabbeinu wealthy? Did he have wealth? So the Gemara tells us in the Dorim that after Moshe Rabbeinu had broken the first set of the luchos, and he was told to bring up a second set of tablets, so the tablets were made of sapphire stone. So he was told to fashion the tablets. The first tablets, everything was from heaven, was min hashamayim. Hashem had provided the tablets, what was inscribed on the tablets, everything Hashem provided. The Lucha Shni is the second set of tablets. After Moshe Rabbeinu had supplicated Hashem, Hashem says, now come up with a second set of tablets. So Moshe Rabbeinu fashioned the second set of tablets, and Hashem told him exactly where to find this large piece of sapphire stone, which the tablets will be inscribed on. And he said to Moshe Rabbeinu that the shearings of the tablet, because it had to be cut, so all the shearings of the tablets were large chunks of sapphire stone. It was worth a fortune. Hashem says, that's my gift to you. You could take it for yourself. And as a result of Hashem gifting the cuttings of the stone, the remnants that were cut away, that's how Moshe Rabbeinu became wealthy. So Moshe Rabbeinu had many things. He had an understanding of spirituality with no one in the history of the world that had his understanding of spirituality, what the world that comes, and how the world, the physical world, doesn't even pale to the world to come. It's less than infinitesimal. And the physical world, what's its value? Its value has no value unless it's connected to the spiritual world to facilitate spirituality. So they can say, Moshe, what do you know? What's your understanding? You're a holy person, but you have no idea what we're all about in terms of the physical setting. Rei anochi nosei lefnechem hayom kol uvrocha. This is the way the Or HaChaim explains it. Rei anochi, I personally, I'm presenting for you the curse and the blessing. I will have a grasp of both worlds. The spiritual world, nobody's my equal. And I am understanding what its innate value is. Nothing compares to that at any level. And this world, the physical world, I'm connected to the physical world. And I'm telling you what? I'm presenting to you brocha and klola. Brocha is following the mitzvahs. Klola is not following the mitzvahs. It's not only not sinning, but detaching yourself from the mitzvahs, that itself is being cursed. I once mentioned him in Maral, we had a pasuk in Estanon, and it's something we say every time when we take the Sefer Torah out. You say a pasuk, Atem hadvekim Hashem Elokechem chaim kol chamayom. Atem hadvekim Hashem Elokechem. You cleave to Hashem Elokechem chaim kol chamayom, and as a result of you cleaving to Hashem chaim kol chamayom, you live continuously. That is your source of life. So Maral of Prague explains what is the source of all existence. Hashem willing continuously existence. Whatever exists, it's only because Hashem wills it. So if you attach yourself and cleave to the source of everything, which wills everything, if you're attached to that, you have everything in the world. The brocha asher tishmun. If you listen to Hashem, you hear His word. Haklolo im lo tishmun. If you detach yourself, the moment you detach yourself from that source, you're cursed. You're all by yourself. You detach yourself from the source of all existence. That itself is a curse. There's a beautiful word from the Nochosh, the snake, who actually seduced Chava to eat of the Eitz Hadas. And afterwards, Chava had given the fruit to Adam, to her husband, to eat. And the world, as a result of this, was taken down. Because Hashem had said, the day you eat, you'll be subject to death. So Hashem says to Chava, why did you eat? So she said, the snake seduced me. So what was the curse to the snake? The curse to the snake was that you're going to slither on your belly, and the earth will be your fodder. You'll be eating earth. And Rashi says, what was the curse? There's no world there's no place in the world where there's no earth. Every species, to be able to survive, has to be its own habitat, to have its own level of sustenance. The snake is able to live anywhere because dirt is that's its fodder. And wherever the snake goes, it has earth. That was the curse. And everything should have the same taste. Earth, you shall eat earth. So they ask a question. I mean, it turns out a blessing. Every other species, it's limited to its habitat to be able to survive. The snake, wherever it goes, is able to survive because it always has a source of sustenance. What's the curse? This is the ultimate blessing. Guaranteed survival wherever you are. So the answer which is given, Ernie, you want to just silence here the computer. So the answer which is given is the Gemara in Avodah Zarah. It speaks about Hashem's daily schedule. What does Hashem do? The first 3 hours a day, the second 3 hours a day, the third, the fourth 3 hours a day. So the first 3 hours a day, Hashem is Yoshev Lomi Torah. Hashem studies Torah. Second 3 hours a day, He judges the world. The third 3 hours a day, what does Hashem do? He sustains the world from the smallest creature, from a microscopic creature to karnei reim, to the largest creature. He provides the sustenance. Every day God is involved in this. What about the snake? Does Hashem provide sustenance for the snake every day? Every other creature, as large it is, as small it is, Hashem has in mind that creature to provide for it every single day. That Hashem thinks about it and provides, there's a connection between that creature, that existence, and Hashem, that's the greatest blessing. The snake, Hashem doesn't want to think about. The snake is such a despised creature because it brought the world down as a result of the seduction of Chava. Hashem says, I don't want to think about you. I don't want to deal with you. You're so detestable, such an abomination. I want nothing to do with you. Therefore, the earth is your fodder. Therefore, when I provide sustenance for every creature, you're not part of that equation. Because you're provided for forever, that I don't even want to think about you. That's the answer which is given why that was the ultimate klolo, that was the ultimate curse to the snake, that he's totally detached from the source of everything, from the source of bracha. Ultimate is what? That Hashem should engage with you every day. That's the ultimate blessing. The Medrash says, the man, we read, the man every day fell, every single day. People would go out, gather in, whatever was meant to be theirs. As much as you gathered, as little as you gathered, there was always enough for the person and his family. And this went on for 40 years. Day in and day out, except for Shabbos. Friday, we get a double portion of the man, which will cover Shabbos. So the Medrash asks, why didn't Hashem say, I'll give you a month's supply of man, a week's supply of man? Why every day did the Jews have to go out and gather in the daily sustenance, which only through that they were able to survive in this unsurvivable environment, which is the desert. Why? So the Medrash answers, Hashem says, if I'd give you a month's supply, how often would I see you? We say out of sight, out of mind. But every day, if you know that you have to come to me, and every day you understand if you don't come, you're not going to survive. You're always going to think about me. And you're always going to want to have a relationship with me. As a result of that, I give you a daily stipend rather than a monthly or a yearly stipend. That's the midrash. But it's a two-sided relationship. Just as Hashem wants us to think about him, Hashem, because he has that relationship with us, he wants to have a relationship with us. As Hashem every day provides from the smallest creature to the largest creature, from this microscopic creature to the largest creature, Raymond was an animal which was of giant size, which it's become an extinct creature. Identically, Hashem wanted to be directly connected to us every day in the Midbar, that he provides this spiritual sustenance, which was in physical form, which was this miracle food for 40 years, to have their relationship, which is the antithesis of the snake. Hashem says, I despise you to such a level, I want nothing to do with you. Therefore, your fodder, sustenance exists as long as existence exists.
But when a person has all they need, it's much harder than to connect to Hashem. So it's it's what the Rav was saying about the snake. It's
interesting. We find Marsis and Yuma that after 120 years, Hillel Mechayves Aniyim, Hillel Hazokim. Hillel originally was a Babylonian. Later, he went to Eretz Yisrael. He became the Nasi. He was the prince because he was from the Davidic line, Hillel. He's Mechayves Aniyim, meaning after 120 years, when you come before the Bezdin Shomalo, the heavenly court, and they ask you a question, Torah, did you set aside time to learn? So the poor man comes, and the poor man says, I was so destitute. I was busy raising money all day just to feed my family. Had nothing. Had no time to study Torah. So Hashem says, well, you're poorer than Hillel. When Hillel was a young man, his Rabbeim were Shmai V'Avtalyon. Shmai V'Avtalyon, they were the leading Torah sages. And they were in Bavel. And in those days, to go into the Beis Medrash, you had to pay a fee. There was an entrance fee. So Hillel, every day, what did he do to earn a living? He would chop wood. He was a wood cutter. He would cut enough wood and then he would sell the wood. He would give a small coin to his wife to support the family. And the other coin he used for an entrance fee to get into the Beis Medrash. That's where he lived his life. One day, he wasn't able to earn enough for the entrance to get into the Beis Medrash. He only had enough to give his wife, gave it to his wife, but he didn't want to miss the shiur. So what did he do? He went to the rooftop, and there was a skylight, and he figured he'll listen to the shiur through the skylight. When Shmai V'Avtalyon, they give this public lecture. He was immersed in the shiur, listening. All of a sudden, it snowed, and he was covered with snow, and he became unconscious. The next morning, it was Shabbos morning, and it was a sunny day. And this light, the sun would come through the skylight. All of a sudden, they see somehow it's overcast. Doesn't make sense. The sun is shining brightly. It's overcast. They look up at the skylight and they see a human form. Meaning somebody's lying there. He must be unconscious. They ran up to the roof. They took off a few feet of snow that snowed on top of him. He was unconscious. He suffered from hypothermia. And they lit a fire on Shabbos because it's pikuach nefesh. And they revived Hillel. So they say to this person who claims the reason why he had no time to study because he was so poor. Well, you're poorer than Hillel. Okay. Hillel somehow found time to study despite of his lack of material. Not that Hashem expects you to be Hillel, But if something is important to you enough in life, somehow we find some time for it. So if that you can't find time anytime, that's only indication that it doesn't play any role of importance in your life. Okay? The rich man comes before the Bezdin Shomalo, and Hashem says, why don't you study? He says, you gave me so much wealth. I had to deal with the wealth. I had no time to study. So they asked him, there was a Tana, his name was Belozim Echarsum. He owned 100 cities on land and 100 ships on the sea, which he inherited from his family. The family were wealthier than him. And he dedicated his life to Torah study. Other things he delegated. No excuse. Evidently, it's clear again, because it doesn't have value to you. That's why you've had no time to study. Then, okay, this next person, man has beauty, handsome, all the women are chasing after him. And he succumbs to temptation, comes before Bezdin Shamala, and they said, why don't you study Torah? He says, you gave me such qualities that were so attractive, and everybody was distracting me, I succumbed to temptation. So they say, we are more beautiful than Yosef HaTzadik. Yosef HaTzadik was the most beautiful man who ever lived. Nobody had his beauty. He had the beauty of his mother. And yet he was in a state of temptation, and he did not succumb to temptation. You need to say, and he was Yosef HaTzadik. No excuse. Okay? So I asked the question, Hillel Zokin, I'm coming to answer Ernie's question. Hillel Zokin, every day he would go out, cut 2 small coins worth of wood. 1 coin he'd give to his wife, the other coin he'd pay for the entrance fee. Here's the question. Why on Sunday or one day of the week he should chop enough wood for a whole week, and the other days he doesn't even have to be distracted. He wakes up in the morning, goes straight to the Beis Medrash. He does his tefillah, he does his limud, and he gives his wife enough money at the beginning of the week and take the money, cover the expense of the family for the week. Why did he every day he would only cut enough wood for the daily need? 1 coin for his wife, 1 coin for the entrance fee. That was the question I asked. So the way I understood it was the way Hashem created us. I'll give you an example. Person lives in a very modest home. All of a sudden, he never ever thought of buying a second home. All of a sudden, he gets a bonus. He gets a bonus. And he says to his wife, I think we need to upgrade our home, or we could afford a second because of the bonus I received. Until he received that bonus, it never entered in his mind that he would even consider or had an interest in having a second home or upgrading his home. He was satisfied where he was. Now, all of a sudden, he has a little bit more. All of a sudden, new horizons open before his eyes. Maybe I could have that. I could have this. Hillel Zokin understood. If you have those extra few coins in your pocket, he wanted to live at the bare minimum, lean and mean. I have what I need. I need it for my wife. I need it for an entrance fee. The moment I have that extra coin, even though I know I need the coins for later in the week, but today that I don't need those coins, and though the extra money's in your pocket, all of a sudden you never know what kind of influence it have on you. I have that extra, and maybe we should upgrade our wardrobe. We should upgrade our home. We have other interests. Hillel didn't want to be challenged. He didn't want to have that challenge. Understanding the nature of a human being, how vulnerable we are to be exposed to material, I want to create every barrier, every fence that I shouldn't be drawn into that. So what you're saying is right. We asked the question, the Maral, we did the Pirkei Avos. The Maral is commentary on Pirkei Avos says, Mishnah says in Pirkei Avos, a person who studies Torah bitochat dochak, when he's in a denied material state, he will study it mitoch oshen. Hashem will give him wealth. And the person who wastes time, when he has wealth, he will waste time in a deprived state. So the Maral asks, Reb Chanina ben Dosa was the poorest man who ever lived. And every day there's a baskol that comes out from Chorev, for as long as he lived. Kolam kula niz mishul Chanina b'ni. The whole world is sustained the mayor of Chanina ben Dosa. Should die lo b'kav charubim Erev Shabbos and Erev Shabbos. For him, it's sufficient he has the small measure of carrot from Erev Shabbos to Erev Shabbos. So Reb Chanina ben Dosa was so dedicated. He sacrificed his life, despite he had nothing, But it says in Pirkei Avos, if you study Torah mitocha dochak, you study it mitocha osher. Hashem will give you wealth. Why would he give him wealth by Hashem? So Rav Kalatsky says he didn't want it. It's available. He didn't want it. Why? Because he understood what wealth could do to a person. He didn't want it. He wanted to live at the bare minimum, and he was doing okay that way. He wasn't looking for anything other than that. That's the reason why Hashem never gave him the wealth. Hashem gives you what you want, and if you say, I don't want it, Hashem doesn't force it upon you. Gemara says at the end of Ksubis, Rabbi Yehuda Nossi was the prince of Israel. He had wealth. He lived like a king. He was a prince. Prince was like the equivalent of a king. And before he passed away, he lifted his 10 fingers to Shemayim. He says, I did not benefit from this world as much as my pinky. Okay? So Mr. Shalom cites Yerushalmi that it says after 120 years, and a person comes to go, Bezdei Shel Malo, there's going to be a claim against the person. Hashem's going to say, if you could have benefited from the world and I gave you the opportunity to benefit, why don't you benefit? Why did you not deny yourself benefit? So if that's the case, Rabbi Yehuda Nossi, what's he priding himself that he didn't benefit as much as a small pinky? He could have benefited. He was a prince. He had everything in the world. And yet he's declaring, I did not benefit from this world as much as my small finger, as much as my pinky. That's the question Mesilas Yesharim asks. Playing Mesilas Yesharim, he says beautifully, but to really appreciate, the Rambam says in Hilchos Deos that a Jew has a Torah obligation to maintain his health, to eat healthy, sleep healthy, to take care of your health. Why? What's the reason? And it's a Torah obligation because you can only have a healthy mind if you have a healthy body. These are the words of Rambam. Why? Because if a person is distracted with pain and ailments, that detracts from your clarity of mind. So you have an obligation to maintain yourself to your best ability, to live responsibly. Because if you don't live responsibly and there are consequences, and those consequences are in the physical, that will detract from the spiritual because you're not going to have the clarity of mind. So any distraction which is due to your own doing, you're doing the wrong thing, that's a Torah violation. That Hashem gives you health, gives you the ability, you must maintain yourself according to your best ability. That's the Rambam. So Mesilas Yesharim says, a person is at a level, he has to eat 3 square meals a day. And he says, you know something? I'm going to cut back, I'm going to have 1 meal a day because I want to be a great tzaddik. But factually, he's craving for food. He needs more than 1 meal. He's not at that level. And therefore, the Gemara says in Tainis, a person who accepts a fast upon himself, he's a chote, you're a sinner. Yet the Gemara says, another person's called a kodesh, you're a holy man. The Gemara says, if it distracts you, it detracts from your function in the spiritual area, then you're a chote, you're a sinner. You have no right to accept the fast. A communal fast is one thing, but to accept a fast upon yourself, you have no right, because if you need, whatever you need that food to maintain your energy and your mind, clarity of mind. We don't have a right to detract from that. Therefore, you're chote. Another person that it doesn't affect him, he has the ability to fast, and he's denying material, and yet he functions similarly and doesn't distract from it or detract from it. That's called kodesh. He's a holy man. So he explains to Mesilas Yesharim that if a person's at a level like Rabbi Yehuda Nossi, that all the material meant nothing to him, nothing. He was the greatest sage. It says Rabbi Yehuda Nossi himself was shtei shulchanos. He merited 2 tables, Torah and wealth, and it did not affect him whatsoever. Not have. He had to have it just because of the persona. Being the prince, he had to live in a palace. He had to wear regal clothing, all that, but it meant nothing to him. Nothing. He did not benefit personally. He did not benefit from it. But someone else is not at that level. And if you deny yourself, I'm not talking about a hedonist, you deny yourself something that the average normal person needs, and you deny yourself, then that's a distraction. That denial is a distraction because you're not at that level. As a result of that, therefore, it's considered you're a sinner, and therefore there's a claim to you, why don't you benefit from this and why don't you benefit from that when you have the ability to benefit? We say, that even if you study, you do a mitzvah, not with you do it with an ulterior motive. Ultimately, you have a chance to bring it to a level of doing it for the right reason. So the Chaim Volozhiner cites the statement of the Gemara, L'olam yasuk adam b'torah mitzvah shlo l'shmo, shemitoch shlo bo l'shmo. He says, L'olam yasuk adam b'torah. You should know, you should always study Torah, L'olam. Torah mitzvah shlo l'shmo, shemitoch shlo l'shmo, bo l'shmo. He says, nobody was born a tzaddik. When we're young, everybody needs incentives. Person has to be incentivized. So you always give a person an incentive, so because you're not there yet, because you don't appreciate the value of what Torah, what mitzvahs are. So you need incentives. And don't be discouraged, say, well, I'm not doing it with the right mindset. No, every human being is that way. And where do we all start? We all start at shlo l'shmo level. Lo lam yasuk adam shlo l'shmo. Shemitoch shlo l'shmo bo l'shmo. Because ultimately he gives an example. The king gives an order to a subject. I want you to go to the second story, and there's a ladder. So he has to climb the ladder. So he has to climb one rung after another till he reaches the second story. But factually, if he goes and it strains himself, maybe he could jump from the first rung to the fifth rung. Does the king expect that? He doesn't expect that. As long as you're going at a pace which is responsive, one rung after another at a normal pace, you're doing the right thing. You're acting responsibly. That you don't go at an unusual pace or abnormal pace, there's no claim against you. We're all born very simple people. We have no appreciation. We have no understanding. You don't have the orientation yet. Where we all begin shloshim. You have to know there is an objective to achieve the shema. So as long as when you start shloshim, you want to hopefully someday come to an understanding of appreciation of what the innate value is, that's b'toch shloshim l'shma. Then a person is able to achieve through the low l'shma to come to the l'shma level. That's Rav Chaim Volozhiner in his commentary on Pirkei Avos. We left Mitzrayim. We were told to borrow the personal effects from the Egyptians, the gold and silver vessels, and we took out wealth, one of a kind of wealth. Every Jew. Why did we take out the wealth? Hashem says to Moshe, please beg the people, beseech the people, when they leave, they should borrow the wealth, the gold, silver vessels. Why? Shloyom oso tzaddik. That the tzaddik Avram Avinu, when originally there was the decree of bondage and affliction, I said to him, when they leave Egypt, they leave a great wealth. So if they don't borrow, they're not going to have the wealth. Therefore, please ask of the Jewish people, they should borrow the gold and silver vessels from their neighbors. Okay? So he cites, the Dum Namag cites a Medrash, I think it's Abaye, says that the Rechush Gadol was Kabbalah Sator at Sinai. That was the great acquisition. When we leave Egypt, the Rechush Gadol means we're going to come to Sinai and accept the Torah, which is the objective of creation. And we're going to become the chosen nation. That's the Rechush Gadol. So he asks, it's explicit in the Pasuk, David no b'oznei ask of them they should borrow. So because that is the fulfillment of what Hashem had promised Avram, so how do we reconcile both? That's the Dubna Bagut's question. So he explains it with a emotion, with an allegory, as he always does everything. There was a young man, he had a summer break. And this young man, he wasn't that educated, he was illiterate, he couldn't read, couldn't write. And his father calls his friend, he says, my son needs a summer job. Could he work on your farm for the summer? He has 3 months. So he says, definitely. He says, but you realize he works for me, he has to work from dawn to dusk, and it's heavy labor. It's not easy. This is my son's committed to work. His son goes 3 months, never's late, never leaves early. The employer is very happy. After 3 months, he takes a piece of paper, writes, what is the payment? $10,000. See, he has a piece of paper, the son, with some scribble on it to him, and he comes home with the paper to his father, and the son's depressed. He says to his father, I just gave the man a pound of flesh for 3 months. Man gives me a piece of paper with some scribble on it. What's it all about? So his father looks at the paper, he sees $10,000. But the son doesn't understand what he just received. So the father says to the friend, he calls on him, says, do me a favor. Take a few silver shiny coins, put them in a bag, and it jingles, put it in the bag, give it to my son, who will be the happiest person in the world. Calls back the son, gives him this bag. He's walking on the air with the son. He's excited. It was worthwhile working, but he didn't appreciate what that paper was. When we left Egypt, what appreciation, what was our capacity to appreciate spirituality? If we would have left Egypt right away, we would have had the capacity to even appreciate, to internalize what that was. No relevance. So when we left, we have to leave the launching pad. We have to give in material wealth. We worked all these years, 210 years, slavery, this and that. This is the initial pay. But that's not the ultimate. The ultimate is after 49 days, when you come to 50th day, then you develop and evolve to have an appreciation of what real wealth is. Then I give you the real bounty, which is Kabbalah Torah. It's that same thing. When we all start out, we start out as on an infantile level. What do we understand? What do we appreciate? We have to be incentivized, everything under the sun. But ultimately, we have to know that ultimately you got to grow up. And you have to understand what the ultimate goal is. Where do you want to arrive? And if you understand that, then one of merits, it's Shlomo, it's Bal Lishmo. You have one person that is given the material to provide for many people. Person is wealthy and he has the ability to distribute and to help many people. That's his position. And that will present the challenge for him, either to serve Hashem or to defy Hashem. Like you said, wealth goes either way. It's not simple. And this is the most difficult challenge that a person has when he's tested, and the greatest level of seduction. When you have wealth, you have people that you control, you have power. Not simple. What is a king? A king always has to have a Sefer Torah with him continuously. A king has an obligation to write 2 Sefer Torah. One that he has in a storage location, and one he always accompanies him. Because a king having power at a level that he's not even permitted to wave his honor, power corrupts. If you have your ego inflated to such a degree, you have something to temper it. What do you have to temper it? It's called Yerushalayim. So the king always has to be accompanied with a Sefer Torah to understand that who's in control. It's not you. That's the greatest challenge when you have an Nisoyom, when other people are dependent upon you, and you actually make a difference in other people's lives. HaMelech Shubmachiv Chelov Vavodav, like a king. He sustains his armies and his subjects. And the ministers and the inner circle of the king. Even the ministers, they have all kinds of people in their internal circle that are dependent upon them, that offer homage to them, whatever it is. And they're seeking out all kinds of opportunities from good places and bad places. And you're surrounded with this. When you're out there, you're doing the big deals. You have all kinds of levels of temptation. You could do things which are 100% above and beyond, that there's not a question, there's any element of illegality to it. As we say, you have to be above the fray, totally above the fray. You don't be drawn in that anybody should ever. There's a concept known as Maris Ayin. A Jew is not permitted to put himself in the position where he's suspect that he's doing anything, although he's doing everything right, but he's suspect he did something wrong. I'll give you an example. To have certain sensitivities is very difficult to other people. The Gemara says at the end of Yuma, Rav, being the leading Torah sage of his generation, he says, if I would pay the butcher late, not on time, my bill to the butcher, it would be a chil Hashem. Why would it be a chil Hashem? Because what is the butcher going to say? The butcher is not a learned person. He's going to say, look, if the great rabbi doesn't pay me on time when I need the money, the rabbi's a thief. The rabbi's stealing. So if the rabbi's permitted to steal, I'm an ordinary person, I shouldn't steal. So because, even though the butcher, it's totally a misunderstanding. Paying a bill late is not stealing. So just because, and he's not even in violation of anything. But nevertheless, because the butcher is pressed and he needs the money, he feels the rabbi is doing something wrong to him. He's stealing. So Rav says, if I should pay the bill late, it's a chil Hashem. Because I'm encouraging people to steal. So what hones Rav's sensitivities? He's not stealing. Because he saw it through a lens that if he, being who he is, should ever do anything and it's misunderstood, he's doing something terrible. So as a result of that, since he's in the public eye, he has to behave above and beyond anything which is imaginable, that it shouldn't be ever seen that he's doing anything incorrect. And he should always be seen in the most positive light, that he should be a positive role model, not a negative role model. So when other people are dependent on you, it's not easy. The Chavetz Chaim writes in the Chavetz Chaim, it's Shmir Saloshen and other works, certain people in shul, the Talmidei Chachamim, and they what? And they're engaging in a Torah conversation before Kriyas Torah. And now they start reading Torah and they're still continuing. Chavetz Chaim says, I don't care what you're talking about. Talk about Torah. But you're not supposed to speak while the Torah is being read. You're not supposed to. Here, these people are supposed to be a model for the ordinary people, what you're supposed to be. How do you behave this way in public? Chavetz Chaim says it's chil Hashem. It's a chil Hashem. How do you behave this way? Many things. So there's certain things, understanding what we represent, the demand of behavior has to be at a certain special level because we're under the public eye. That's what. But knowing that and appreciating that causes us to be extra sensitive and careful, and as a result of that, we maintain ourselves at a different level. Okay, let's see the Mishnah Berurah. Rambam says that what's tshuva? Tshuva is yoshev bicheto. You do tshuva and you extricate yourself from your past behavior, and you have an oral confession. It's called vidui dvorim, oral verbal confession. It quotes a pasuk. According to Rambam, the only time the person's atoned when he does tshuva, you have to have remorse in your heart and remove yourself from your past behavior, and you have to verbalize it. Otherwise, it's not tshuva. So the Minchas Chinuch asks a question from Lauren Kedushin. A man is not a tzaddik. He's even a rasha. And he marries a woman. He says to her, I'm marrying on the condition that I'm a tzaddik. Tzaddik gomer. I'm a tzaddik gomer. Because the woman says, unless you're a tzaddik, I'm not marrying you. He says, I'm marrying on the condition I'm a tzaddik gomer. And he gives her a ring and she accepts it. Presence of two witnesses. So Moshe says, it's Safi Kedushin. It's a question, why? Even though he's a Russian till now. Because Shema Hirir Tshuva Believer. Because maybe in his heart, he had stirrings of Tshuva. So if he had stirrings of Tshuva, he's a tzaddik. And since it can't be determined what, yes or no, therefore, it's a Safi Kedushin. So they ask on the Rambam, Minchas Chinuch asks, but according to Rambam, unless you have oral confession, it's not tshuva. It's not tshuva, it's irrelevant to me whether he has stirrings in his heart or not. If it's not tshuva, he's still a rasha. His classification is rasha. So why is it a Safi Kedushin? That's the question which is asked by the Minchas Chinuch. Very simple. What is tshuva? When a person sins, you create a deficiency in your spirituality, and you have to have you're culpable, you're liable for punishment. When you do tshuva as prescribed by the Torah, it's a full rehabilitation. It's as if you never sinned. The person is reinstated. But what about, so we're talking about it's a healing process, a spiritual healing process, and even beyond. It brings you over the top. When you do tshuva as prescribed by the Torah. What happens if you don't do tshuva as prescribed by the Torah? But the person says, from now on, I'm turning over a new leaf. New leaf. I will never go back there in his mind. Classification-wise, he's a tzaddik. Rehabilitation, if you take the medication as prescribed by the doctor, it works. You don't take it as prescribed, it doesn't work. Do you want to get better? Yes, you want to get better. Except you're not taking the medication right. If you want the tshuva to work, you have to have remorse in your heart. Commit yourself, you're not going back there, you have to verbalize it. You don't do it, you're not doing it right. But in terms of where do you want to be? Do you want to be the Russia or do you want to be the tzaddik? If he has stirrings in his heart that he wants to be a tzaddik, his classification is tzaddik. Is he rehabilitated? He's not rehabilitated. Rehabilitation, you have to follow the prescription of the Torah, which is verbal confession, which he didn't do. Therefore, it's not a contradiction from the Gemara. It's a Safek Kedushin, but since he said, I want to be on the Kedushin, I'm a tzaddik, he may have stirrings in his heart of tshuva. If he has stirrings, he's new classification. What is he? Tzaddik. If that's the case, he met the precondition. Rambam here is speaking about to be reinstated. We talk about kapora, to be fully rehabilitated. There you have to have vidu peh, you have to have oral confession. That's the answer of the mental chinuch.
Very nice.
Unhealthy for the first 50 years of his life. And because of that, he has failing health. Doctor says you continue this way, you will not live another year. If you change your eating habits and your behavior habits, you can live another 20 years. But you lived the 20 years in an unhealthy state. He can't undo the 50 years he lived unhealthy. But at least now living healthy for the next 20 years, will be able to live. Otherwise, he's going to die. Same idea. In terms of what you've done, spiritual deficiency, that remains in place. Going forward, what's your behavior going to be? Only positive. That's tzaddik. Two separate things, two separate issues, discussions. David, you're following. The oral confession, that's the mitzvah saseh. That's the positive commandment. Now, how does one make the oral confession? What does one have to say? On Hashem, please Hashem. Chotosi ovisi poshati lefonecho. I've sinned inadvertently, I've sinned deliberately, I've sinned defiantly. Lefonecho, before you. And I said, this is the point, before you. It's not enough to say, to know you're speaking to God. Part of the atonement is, it's an offense against God. Lefonecho. V'osisi kach v'kach. According to Rambam, you have to articulate the sin. It's not enough to say, I've sinned. If you spoke Lashon Hara, you have to say Lashon Hara. If you stole, you have to say, I stole. Whatever the sin is, you have to articulate the sin. Or in the chamti uboshti. I have remorse and I'm embarrassed. The Masai, as a result of my actions, I will never go back to act in that manner any longer. A full detachment from the past. Rambam says, I will never go back there. It's a pretty strong statement. Could you make such a commitment? You'll never know. Only God knows. But at least within the person, that has to be where he's not deluding himself. I will never go back. So there's a question which is asked by Rabbi Shol Salanter. Person comes for Yom Kippur, does tshuva on Lashon Hara. He's never studied the laws. Was never careful. He makes a commitment this coming year, I will not speak Lashon Hara. Is that reality? You can make a commitment, I'm going to try not to. I'm going to study the laws. But to say that you're not going to speak Lashon Hara, it's impossible. Unless you're really conditioned not to speak and you know the laws, you're not going to speak. And even there, then it's not speaking. So until now, you've always spoken irresponsibly. Do you think by making the commitment, that's going to cause you not to speak? Especially when you didn't study the laws. So how could a person do tshuva ever on Lashon Hara until he's fully adept and really he has a grasp on it. So he says a person can make a commitment, speak 10% less. 10% less is reality. 20%. And simultaneously, I accept it by myself. I can study the laws and I can control myself and I'm going to upgrade continuously. That's a commitment. That's considered. But tshuva, how much tshuva did you do? Only on 20%. Are you going to be held accountable for the other 80%? No, because you've already made a commitment that you're going to go and address the other 80% gradually because you're going to continuously upgrade. Okay, we're going to stop here.